and then
we're just going to cut in on this one.
Great. That's what
to say a lot of things that you don't want on record. Thanks, bud.
Yeah. Yeah,
did
that's
you
funny.
Bring me the book. I see you got yourself a soda there. Yes, you can.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I'm going to get talking before I realize that you've...
I'm like hey, can you shut the door, bud? I'm like a ninja with the record button there.
You even put the mic in my face.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't even think about what's going on.
I know that people normally drink coffee out of a Conspiracy Dad mug, but so since it's 7:00 at night, I don't want to be up all night. I'm going to use a nice little soda water in my conspiracy. You know, you don't have to drink coffee in a coffee mug.
No, these Conspiracy Dad mugs.
Soda water.
Very versatile.
It doesn't matter whether it's a hot or a cold product. It actually keeps it either way. The thermal dynamics of it works the same.
Yeah, it'll get lukewarm eventually.
A thermos does the same thing. You can put cold in a thermos. It keeps it cold. Hot in a thermos. The law of entropy. I don't know what I'm talking about.
I just thought, this mug does not work like a thermos.
There's a guy that I listen to. You can probably look him up. When I was researching, we won't get into this because it's another conspiracy, but he's a flat earther and he's like the flat earth engineer. So he's like an engineer, like actually has a degree in engineering, and he's a flat earther, which is an odd match. But he went on a rant about like thermal dynamics and why that makes sense, like for a flat earth model.
Oh.
And I can't remember it because it was years ago when he went through it, but it was interesting to listen to it, but it just blew my mind. Like, I know engineers, engineers, I mean, pretty matter of fact kind of people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And somehow he had this idea of like, it all made sense. You know what I mean? And then but he was so well articulated, like you couldn't look at him and say he's dumb.
Right.
He's not dumb. He understands a lot of things, but somehow he ended up like way over here.
Yeah.
Like the average, like most people ended up over here is this outlier. And it had something to do with thermodynamics. And he was like, the moon emits like cold energy and the sun emits heat. And he was like, if you take a thermometer, it's like in the sun, it warms up. But if you put it in moonlight, it actually gets colder. I don't know if that's true.
So what I'm picturing is a guy bringing that up unsolicited in a conversation. And you just have no rebuttal because not only is he talking about stuff that's way over your head, but you're like, I didn't ask you about any of that. And why would I know what a thermometer does when I put it out under the moon?
Yeah.
I guess I have to take your word for that. Until
I thought
now I got to
really
hunt down a thermometer with actual mercury.
Actually,
in it.
now you're making me remember. I thought about recreating that experience. I was like, I'm going to take a thermometer out to the moon.
Yeah, I'm going to have to find a thermometer.
And I've never did it. Maybe we should do it tonight after the podcast. We'll go out in the moonlight and we'll hold it up and we'll go, oh my gosh, the earth is flat.
That is maybe it's because we've been looking at moon landing stuff, but it feels like the flat earth has been coming up a lot this week for me.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Just keeps getting mentioned, people mentioning it. And I'm not one that entertains that theory often, but...
The flat earth theory?
Today really was the first time I was like, maybe it is flat.
I remember I was just explaining where these people are coming from to a buddy of mine. And I think he was talking about it around his kids at some point. and his wife is a very smart person.
Yeah.
And so he said, he was like, the other day, he's like, I kind of got in trouble because the other day we were looking at the moon and my son said something about it. And I said, well, maybe it's not as far away as we think it is or something. And he said, his wife looked at him with like this cold stare, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, that's like,
and he was like, I'll shut up now.
Never mind. Yeah, my wife and kids were heading off to church, and Jane says, you going to do conspiracy dads? I said, yeah. She goes, what are you talking about today? And the car's pulling off. I go, we didn't land on the moon. Have a good time at church.
Yeah. Maybe that's an aspect of this show. Like conspiracy dad is like, we're helping dads navigate because at some point your kids ask you about reality and you're either going to tell them the truth or you're going to lie. When the tooth fairy comes, like at some point you do say, son, you're 13.
Exactly right.
The tooth fairy, I'm sorry to tell you, it's just me. I did tell my kids that. I said that my oldest son knew, and my oldest daughter, she was smart enough, like she knew, she was pretending, but she knew.
Yeah.
And I said something like, well, the tooth fairy has a beard or something like that.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The other kids just laughed, and she's like, I know.
Okay.
Like, I get it, Dad.
My son, the dominoes fell real quick. Like he figured out the tooth fairy, and then it was just every other one. Santa Claus,
God,
Easter
everything.
Bunny. Yeah, he put the pieces together.
And did he like go all the way to and one day we're all gonna die?
No, he didn't jump into that, but yeah,
that's a lot to take in.
He has had some pretty deep existential comments before where you're like, "Hey, take it easy. Get back to."
Just go play.
Yeah, get back. Yeah,
just be
exactly.
a kid.
Get on
Have
your
fun.
Switch again.
They play the Switch, huh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my kids.
Oh yeah.
Are we switching here now that I think about it? Dadgummit, we're not on Switch. I didn't hit auto.
Oh,
you said that. That's so funny. You'd say Switch, and then I looked down and thought, I wonder if the switcher's working.
Is the switcher for
the
switcher's
camera not working?
No.
But watch here in about 10 seconds, it's going to switch.
So it's just been me.
Yeah,
there we go.
There we go.
It's just been footage of me responding to you.
But that's not so bad. That's not so bad.
It's documented that I was genuinely enjoying this conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You keep rolling. I got to make a tweak on the camera.
Oh, flat Earth. Yeah, I don't really think the Earth is flat, but today I did take a moment to consider the fact that I've never driven all the way around it, and what happens if you just keep going west?
Well, you run into the ice wall eventually.
Is that what it is?
That's
There's
the
an
theory.
ice wall?
Is that that's why I think. Okay, we'll do a flat Earth podcast one day, but the gist of it is, if you've never looked into flat Earth, is something along the lines of Antarctica is actually like a massive,
like
a massive
the
ice wall,
like the ring.
Yeah, and we're all in this big fishbowl.
Yeah,
and that's why when they discovered Antarctica or whatever, like all of the world governments immediately just got together and got along and said, this is just everyone territory, but no one can ever go here. And you can't.
Yeah, that is.
And it's like this perfect argument because it's like, yeah, but it's so cold if you go there. Like, yeah, no one goes there because it's incredibly cold.
You don't want to go there.
It's as large as like North America. I get it. It's a huge continent, or it's not as large, but it's pretty big. But there's like this perfect argument of like, you could say, yeah, there was an expedition that went there in the 1930s and they discovered an entire other continent that we don't know about. And then, you go, how can you prove that?
Yeah.
Well, go there and go see for yourself. You go, it's freezing.
Yeah.
There's polar bears. There's, like it's so cold. Actually, there's not polar bears. My son corrected me the other day. They're only at the North Pole.
Oh,
it's penguins in Antarctica.
Proves the point.
But yeah, I mean, I think there have been flat earthers who have like done GoFundMe's to try to raise money to
really
take a flight. We should ask Kokomo to do it. We could just be like, hey, buddy, can we just keep flying? When it gets really cold and they tell you turn back or you're going to die, can we just keep going?
Just see what happens. Yeah.
Roll the dice.
Roll the dice.
That is the theory in a nutshell. It's
okay. Now that helps. I was picturing like a waterfall.
Have you never seen a flat Earth map of the world?
No, I've always been extremely dismissive of it, and
somehow we're podcasting about flat Earth now.
Yeah,
but
right.
Somehow, like the moon and the sun are supposed to you got to get out of this whole orbital thinking, and it's more like it's moving around. But then you just it's kind of like the turtles all the way down thing, where you're like, well, what's moving it? Oh, something you know what I mean? Like there has to be some mechanics to this, and I don't understand that.
Whoever built the mechanics is likely the same person that hung the moon that's not the right size for our planet that you were talking about last week.
I am the guy that's saying the moon is too big.
Yeah.
But then also somehow that makes sense to me to just say, well, it's too big, but to make that leap to the Earth is flat and there's a giant ice wall keeping us all inside of it. Need that flat Earth engineer to come on and tell us. He had it all figured out. I mean, somehow.
Somebody like that, I don't think I could come up with questions to keep the conversation going.
I bet I could.
Yeah, good, because I don't have it enough in me to figure out how to navigate that conversation.
Well, there's I can't remember his name. There is a guy I'll look up and we'll do a flat earth episode. There's a guy that he's been on a lot of big podcasts and he's like he presents a lot of interesting, like test this kind of thing. But, a lot of those tests are like things that I don't have the ability to actually test. You know what I mean? Like going to the center of Antarctica.
Right. Yeah.
I wish I could, but I'm just trying to pay my taxes and keep the mortgage and all of that. I don't have the funds to fly to the center of Antarctica. So
yeah, I hear you. I'm just thinking of all the stuff that, I've got regular stuff to do. I have a water pump that needs to be replaced.
Stuff to do.
Exactly. Yeah. I can't be jet setting all over to Antarctica.
Which maybe before we get into this, thank you to all the dads who tune into the Conspiracy Dad podcast. What do you like? It's a lot of responsibility to be a conspiracy
a leader
dad
at the forefront of the dad.
How are you enjoying this journey as a conspiracy dad?
Well, hopefully any dad that's listening is kind of can relate to my adventure, where it's one of those like, I wouldn't give the thought that the flat earth is even a thing any time of day. And then it does make your world a little more interesting if you consider for a brief moment that it might be flat. And
it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. It's entertaining. But what can be disconcerting is when you get into something like what we're talking about today with fake moon landing, where again, that's something that the first time I heard that,
government's involved in it.
First time I heard that, I was like, that's ridiculous. That's funny that somebody even thought that once. And now I'm like, I was bothering the dudes in the band I was playing with this weekend. I was like, hey man, do you think we landed on the moon? And the guitar player's like, well, yeah. I mean, everybody thinks we landed on the moon.
That's what I'm supposed to say, right?
And I was like, no, I don't think that we did. Yeah. So
what was his reaction?
It was like sometimes when you bring up a conspiracy theory with somebody that didn't bring it up, you're like, have you ever been bringing that conversation to somebody?
I do it all the time.
And you can see they like you as a person, but they're kind of looking for an exit.
I do kind of judge people I want to hang out with by that though.
Yeah.
I think Jack Parsons was right about one thing, and that was like, it is more interesting to be around people who are not mundane.
Right. Yeah.
So that might be a thing that, like, moving forward, I do feel like if you were to ask me, do you want to be friends with mundane people or people who are not? I am in the camp of, I kind of like that my friends are not mundane. Mm-hmm. And some of that, I don't mean like destructive, but they're people that, I don't know, we're different.
What I like about it is it puts your ideas through their paces. So this moon landing thing, that's ridiculous. Of course we landed on the moon. And then you introduce the idea of one of the points McGowan makes about, well, what if we were using it as a distraction to where the American public's not thinking about Vietnam? And I'm like, well, that might happen. Yeah. Right. So when it's paired alongside like generally widely known history, you go, okay, well, that's got a little bit of merit. And I guess where I'm going with that is, there are some conspiracy theories that I go, well, I don't really see a lot of grounds for that. But then there are other ones where I go, whew, that really rings true for me, Mm-hmm. So like I said last week, we'll do temperature checks. Right now I'm feeling pretty convinced.
Well, that's a part of this episode is the temperature checks on the moon.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, that's one of those. There's lots of little things that you just never consider when you're a red-blooded American just going to school and they just tell you this thing happened and you never go like, what is the temperature of the moon?
If you thought that the climate in Tulsa, Oklahoma varied a lot, try going to the moon.
Yeah. And then you consider like the hottest of the hottest summer you've ever been in, and you go, it was quite a bit hotter than that. Yeah.
And then walk under the shade.
And then you go like the coldest you've ever felt. And you go, it's quite a bit colder than that.
Yeah.
And then you go like, but they had air conditioning, right?
Well, there was no air.
There was no air
to speak of.
Must be some secret technology for air conditioning that we don't know about.
Wouldn't that be nice to get your hands on that air conditioning? Yeah.
But I gave away part of the episode now. But let's
right.
just. I think we recapped. We're going through David McGowan's Wagging the Moon Doggy.
Right.
And we left off at the beginning of chapter 2. Right. We touched on that the moon rocks are suspicious, dubious might be the right way to say it. There's a lot of missing moon rocks, and NASA has given out some seems to be bogus moon rocks. I don't know why they would do that, but
the weird thing about that is they gave away petrified wood that they said was a moon rock, but then we actually do have moon rocks here that they could have given away.
That's what I thought is like, well, you'd have to go out and get that petrified wood. Like, did they just walk out the back of NASA and pick up something off like the, and like, this looks kind of like the moon rocks. Yeah, give the Dutch that.
You ever use those Coinstar machines where you dump all your change into the thing? And inevitably there's always like a Canadian nickel or a peso or something. And you just snuck in with all your other change. I wonder if that's like what was in their tub of moon rocks. Somebody bumped the countertop and a piece of petrified wood fell in there. And the Dutch just happened to be the ones that received it.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like, God, you just would think that's a job that somebody has when you go like, well, hey, we need to like, there's a job and you're the moon rock guy. NASA has X amount of moon rocks. They're cataloged. They're in a thing. And every now and then we have to give one to some dignitary and they call you up and they go, well, we need a moon rock. And you go, all right, here's one that you can have. You're not going to mix in other rocks.
No.
Like you had one job, man.
That's exactly why I was so astounded at the end of the last episode when we got into that they lost all of the files.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy whose job it would be just to keep some of the files.
If they said we lost like a handful of the files, you might, you know what I mean? Like, like this one here or that one there. But to say like everything's gone.
Yeah.
I mean,
this is the government we're talking about.
And they didn't even pair it with like there was a fire.
Right.
Some kind of story to like explain why everything's gone. It's just we can't find it.
No, we don't know. And it's not even there was a fire, or we had a guy that was keeping all of the schematics. He lost them. We fired him. Like there's not any kind of story like that. It's just kind of like, hey, NASA, where are the documents? And they just give you this like,
they're gone.
No,
missing. Yeah.
I found an article today of Ripley's Believe It or Not. The headline was that they had some original video footage of the moon landing. And I was like, oh, it's like a new development. And then I read further in the article, it's just the same. It's just
rebroadcast.
Another rebroadcast piece of footage. So, it's just nobody really wants to get into what happened to all of that. Oh, one thing they said in the article was, we think that NASA just taped over that. Like taping some other... You taped over the moon landing?
There is something to like when you witness a historical event, usually if you witness it like by accident. So like we were just talking a minute ago about the Oklahoma City bombing.
Yeah. I'm not laughing about that. I'm laughing about a different thing that I'd videoed the wrongs. Like I thought I was recording and all I got was footage of me figuring out that I didn't record the thing. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just saying, like, I had that thought I was a child when the Oklahoma City bombing happened, and you kind of normalize it. Like, you don't realize in the midst of history that history's happening.
Totally.
It's like, it's not till you finish the book that you go like, oh, God, that was a really important chapter in the book. And so I had that experience as an adult. I didn't, like, until my probably early 20s even start to go like, that was pretty strange that I was a kid and they blew up the building and killed a bunch of children and just understood that. And so it's saying you could kind of say that if it's like, sometimes maybe they didn't think going to the moon was that big of a deal.
We'll be back again soon.
Yeah, like, it's just, this is just the first trip. Why keep all this?
Why
does it really matter?
Yeah.
I find that hard to believe though, because that feeling usually happens when it's unexpected. It was like we were very deliberate about what we were doing.
Sure.
We were going to go where no man has gone. You know what I mean? Like this was... a lot of money,
It was a big deal.
lot of people. The idea that you wouldn't understand the significance of it and you would just delete a bunch of information from that. I don't understand that.
Yeah. To your point, it's like that first child that's born. You get their first steps on video. You get their first words. You get pictures of their first that, and everything.
Poor fourth, fifth
but
child.
Exactly, yeah. As the kids keep getting born, less and less stuff gets documented. But the kid's first moon landing, you're going to capture that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Everything.
Right.
Well, so we did the moon rocks. I know you have some notes, but what was the next point in that second article?
Article 2, what I thought was another point of note was he makes a case that there was no equipment failure for 6 or 7 missions. We had no problems. And it was after we had a lot of trouble here inside
just getting
our
into
atmosphere.
low Earth orbit. Yeah.
And so that is pretty unlikely or unusual for any kind of technological advancement.
I did think, well, you could say, it was before it was a priority. Funding might have been a difference. And you go at first we were like shoestring budget, trying to do everything. And then overnight, JFK gives the thumbs up, and
before
all of a sudden
the end of the 60s,
we have billions of dollars to work with.
Yeah.
And there's a big difference between having 100,000 and $1 billion. And all of a sudden,
when the boss says this is priority
all of a
one,
sudden, we can buy the nice equipment. You know what I mean? So maybe that's
getting them craftsman tools, guys. Nice.
No cobalt.
No, exactly.
That's funny. I was at Lowe's today and I was buying screwdrivers. I needed a specific, and I'm sitting there looking at the cobalt. It's like $17, and the craftsman was like $25.
Yeah.
But in my head, I'm going I know that's better metal than the craftsman, and if I buy that, it's not going to last. I'll be an old man, but one day it's going to break, and I'm going to think, I wish I'd gotten that craftsman.
I had the $8 at the time.
Yes,
Why didn't I? I bought the cobalt earlier this week deliberately because I thought I'm probably going to break this tool. So I want it to be the less expensive one.
I ended up buying cobalt.
Sorry, Cobalt. I didn't mean to take a dig
disparage your
probably not
Chinese
be a sponsor now. But Craftsman, hey, if you're catching the Conspiracy Dad podcasts, we're pro Craftsman.
So shoot, where were you left?
Just that there was no equipment failure. I don't know if you want to get into much more of that, except for just that, we had some failed tests here. We had a lot of issues, and Russia was just crushing us in the race to space. And then out of nowhere, at the last second, we just start landing on the moon. We have all these space missions that one of the little fact tidbits that's in this series of articles says, depending on where you read, there are either 9 million or 6 million or 16 million components on the spacecraft. All of it was different numbers of million, but for all of those millions of parts,
that seems hard to believe.
To not
is there that many parts in a Toyota?
I don't know. I'd have to see the bill of materials, how many nuts.
Because you just look at the lunar module, and it's it does look like a lot of stuff, but it doesn't look like millions of stuff.
Well, I think that must be counting I guess to get to millions of pieces. Are you counting the framing around the rocket before it takes off?
Or is that would almost have to be counting everything on Earth too, the entire platform connected.
Well,
because if you're telling me that little shuttle,
right? No, I agree. That seems like
millions of parts. It's
that seems like bad design to have that.
Yeah, I guess if you're breaking down to the molecular, maybe
you're right. Maybe it's
it must be everything in the system that it takes to on the ground, in the air, everything functioning together.
And that might account for
millions
the disparity in the count on the parts too. Because when I heard that, I thought 9 or 16 million. Geez, that's half or double the amount.
That's there's a lot of variation there.
Yeah. Either way, lots of parts. I think we could all agree that there are a lot of pieces on a space shuttle.
There's 9 or 16 million.
Yeah. Or 6.
Or 6. Duct tape and tinfoil.
Regardless, none of the parts malfunctioned on multiple missions. in outer space.
And most importantly, the first one.
Yeah, the first one. We nailed it.
Yeah.
I can tell you most things that I try the first time, not successful. I've got to fail at it a handful of times.
I did that the other day with a song. There's a girl that was singing with me, and it was a new song we had never done. And we didn't have a lot of time to practice it, but I knew this because I've played music long enough. I knew we were going to mess it up. Like I learned that a while back that like when I'm doing a song in front of an audience for the first time, I am in my head. I just know now you're going to mess it up the first time, and then you'll have it down after that. And so we messed it up. She messed it. We both messed it up. But then afterwards, I was like, "Ah, that's pretty good," you know. But I was explaining that to her that like, hey, don't feel bad. Like I know from experience, like
that's the rep you got to get out of the way.
You're gonna mess up the first time.
Yeah.
You just have to get that out of your head and just keep moving forward. And I think that's probably true with most complicated things. Like you swing and you hit a home run the first time. It's just rare.
No, to your point, and sticking with that analogy with music, like you can practice a song in your bedroom infinite amount of times, and you can get to where
that's a good point.
Yeah, you've got the lyrics down. You know
they were
the
on
chord
stage.
Changes. Yes, you don't have the song down until you've got it a few times on a stage, and then you go, now we got it.
And that's what I mean. Like those astronauts,
and you're right. They were on stage.
You were on stage.
Yeah.
Everyone's watching. Maybe you just nailed it, but performers would probably tell you. I mean, that's why comedians, before they do their specials, they'll specifically go on the road and play small clubs, and they're testing out, and they don't film that. Obviously, they'll go into clubs all over, and they test out the material that works, that lands and it doesn't land, and then they'll cut out the things that don't land. And over a course of a few months, eventually they get to a point where they do their special, and everything that they say, they know this is going to land and it's going to be awesome. And it's almost like a magician, because you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, they're just so funny. Right. Well, it's not rocket science. They've tested all of this.
Battle tested.
Yeah, they've tested it, and they know exactly what's going to work and what's not going to work. Usually. But usually. So then they go from there into, doesn't he get into the lunar module itself, and like he's talking about like the just the unlikelihood that you could travel through space with something like that, land on the moon and then take back off and make it back to Earth.
Oh, the thing is that back in the frontier days, we didn't need all that fancy technology and book learning to send Buzz and the boys to the moon and back. Back then, we had American can-do spirit, and we just cowboyed up and MacGyvered those spaceships to the moon. Yeah, he said all we needed was an old Volkswagen engine, some duct tape, and a roll of baling wire. Throw a roll of butt wipe and a little tang on board, and you were good to go. Yeah, he's just making the point that, like,
because he starts talking about the list of things that they took, like the space, and like how much stuff you'd have to fit into a 6x6.
Yeah,
like a very small space.
Yeah, I didn't realize that those space shuttles were as small as they were. Like, uncomfortable for two guys to ride alongside each other. It's sort of like when you're in the back of an extended cab truck. Like, yeah, there are seats back there, but it's not roomy.
It's like, doesn't he make the point too that like at the museum, the module they have there, they even say something the mannequins in here are smaller than scale because they're almost like miniature humans. And then you think like, well, okay, if you had real sized humans in there, that's not a lot of space. It's very tight. I can't
remember if that's in this second article or not. I'm looking to see that.
I think it was the second.
I do remember that. Yeah, there is an article with a picture up. Yeah, there it is. Let's see. NASA has done something very odd, by the way, with the lunar module that it has on display for museum visitors to marvel at. It has staffed it with miniature astronauts wearing miniature spacesuits. The module may also be scaled slightly larger than the real modules that allegedly landed on the moon. I wonder why they would do that. I'm pretty sure that Buzz and Neil were of normal stature, so the only reason I can think of is that they would use miniature astronauts would be to portray the modules as larger than they actually were. And in better condition, too. Did they pick up the ones that they sent to the moon at a used car lot? So,
Well, and I could see something like, well, we want people to see more of what's in here. So,
like, have the module be the focus, so the astronaut
or
figures would be
just
smaller.
if you're making a display, like doing it in a way where, okay, yes, it was more cramped in here than this was, but we want public to see more. You know what I mean? Like there's a presentation factor where it's just maybe you're just trying to show it in a way where people see it better.
Yeah.
But no doubt in the actual module it was cramped. Like you did not have much space at all. This room in here is 12 by 12, so it's half the size of this.
Okay. And
right?
Like you said, yeah, I haven't gotten to the gear, but I do like the caption under the photo that he provides. Before moving on, I need to emphasize here just how sophisticated the lunar modules actually were. These remarkable spacecraft, and I understandably get a little choked up here talking about this because I'm just so damn proud of our team of Nazi scientists. They managed to make 6 perfect takeoffs from the surface of the moon. And understand here, people, that they did that amazingly enough with completely untested technology. Sorry, I didn't mean to jump off your subject of the equipment that they brought, but that makes the point better than I was making it earlier as far as just, here we go with just untested equipment. We're going to cross our fingers and hope for the best.
One time you could, but his point about
6.
like 6 times.
6 times in a row. Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
But I do think too, the space, like thinking of how much stuff you could fit in a 6x6. Isn't it right? It was 6x6. It was like 12.
I don't know.
I could be wrong about that. It couldn't have been bigger than this room.
Okay. Yeah. You're right. He lists, yeah. Let's see.
And they took machetes.
Navigation. Yeah.
Why would you take a machete to space?
In his writing, he lists off like a bunch of things that make sense. You know, navigation equipment, batteries, mylar wrap, air tubing, whatever. And then he's like, and for some reason, machetes. And I'm like, well, that's what dudes would do. You don't know what you're going to run into up there.
They could have been like, they didn't know. Maybe they were going to be like, space aliens they need to fight.
That's what I'm thinking. A machete's a pretty versatile tool. It's an axe.
But they knew there wasn't any like plants to chop down. But what else do you need a machete for?
Like you said, if you run into aliens, you're gonna have
Will Smith, he would have wanted a machete. When he opened that.
God, the Men in Black would look so hardcore if they just.
I was thinking Independence Day when he like opened the thing and the alien comes out and he punches him. If he had a machete, he could chop him.
Yeah, I like that idea too. Yeah. Either way, Will Smith, he needs to carry a machete as a prop.
Yeah.
Pretty sweet. Let's see. This is supplier, multiple sides. I'm not finding where they list. It may not be in this one, but there is a piece in here somewhere where it lists everything that they had to pack. And like you said, in addition to it barely being big enough for 2 people to ride for very long.
And everything in it needing batteries.
Yeah.
Awesome batteries that can survive extreme heat, extreme cold, and can power the whole system to come back here.
Yeah, you talk about extreme cold and batteries. In the north, like our buddies from that New England Legends podcast.
Yeah.
They probably plug their batteries in at night in the wintertime, right? To keep them warm so that the car will start. But,
well, the temperature is actually, what is it, 260 Fahrenheit to 230? Let's see. Negative 230 Fahrenheit?
I think it might be one. I mean, before I get into
it's in. I didn't know that before I read this guy's article, but when I thought about it, I was like, oh my God, that's insane. That's an insane. And because there's no atmosphere, anytime you're in the sun, you're instantly cooking. And then when you're in the shade, you're instantly freezing.
Yeah.
There's no like in between. It's like, I mean, that seems a little, if you think about the hottest summer you've ever been in, when it's like, 50, 60 degrees hotter than that?
I think, if I recall, I'm not finding it just yet, but off the top of my head, it was something like 240 degrees in the heat, and it was something like negative 160 degrees in the shadows. I mean, it's
My God.
giant
Yeah.
temperature swing.
How do you survive 240 degrees in the heat? And it could be entirely possible that we're so stupid. We're so stupid that an engineer from NASA is listening to this going like, yes, of course, we have suits that can do that.
Yeah, I guess. But
they didn't wear the suits.
Well, see, but the thing is, here's a quote from, we'll get into this later. It looks like this is this is Article 12, but, and if NASA returns to the moon in 2020 as planned, this article was written before 2020. This something like 2015, I think.
Which we didn't return to the moon in 2020, did we?
If NASA were to return to the moon, they'd stand out in a brand new spacesuit. It goes on to say it's has a hard upper torso layer of material to protect astronauts from the micrometeoroids and radiation, and then a temperature regulation system and its own life support and communication system. The EMU weighs over 300 pounds. Now, the point I'm getting to here is just that this very advanced spacesuit that we were looking at having in 2020 was making accommodations for temperature regulation. And that's just, because like we were saying, it gets unearthly hot is the adjective that he uses in here, and cold. It's like, yeah, like you said, I wasn't aware that the temperature was so extreme there.
You really weren't before reading?
I've never been to the moon, so how would I know?
They don't talk about that in school.
No, and yeah, that's another thing. Why didn't the astronauts go, geez, you guys wouldn't believe the weather on the moon? Yeah. So anyway, that I thought was pretty wild. Man, we didn't even get to Article 3 yet. We're still talking Article 2.
Well, did we miss something in Article 2? Is that pretty much all they covered?
That's all the notes I had was, first he's talking moon rocks. Then he talks about equipment failure or the lack of equipment failure, untested equipment. He does get into that lunar module on display with the little micro folks, models. It's like we had little people for astronauts. And then, no equipment failure. So,
do you want to touch on Article 3 at all, or?
Yeah, sure.
You said that was your favorite.
It was my favorite.
Why is it your favorite?
Probably because
don't they explain the concept of wagging the dog and like how that relates?
The reason it was my favorite was probably because I just finished this really long book on Vietnam, so my head was already deep into like all through the 60s and both the Johnson and the Nixon administration. Of course, Kennedy's the one that announces we're going to make it to the moon by the end of the decade. So by the time we get to the end of the decade, Nixon's just made it into office. We're quite a few years into Vietnam. And by this point, the general population is like, even more of the conservative side of the population is starting to go, we got to get out of here. This does not seem like a productive use of our resources. So I want to find the way McGowan reads it because his explanation is better than mine.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to that idea he had about this whole thing. In his opinion, this whole thing was a distraction for military purposes.
Yeah.
Both in space and what was happening around here. It's like anytime we didn't want people to talk about, certain things happening. Well, look, there's a guy on the moon,
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the excerpt here starts with returning then to the question of why such a ruse would be perpetrated. We must transport ourselves back to the year 1969. Richard Nixon has just been inaugurated as our brand new president, and his ascension to the throne is in part due to his promises to the American people that we will disengage from the increasingly unpopular war in Vietnam. But Tricky Dick has a bit of a problem on his hands. He has absolutely no intention of ending the war. Goes on, let's see. He needs to set up a diversion, some means of stoking the patriotic fervor of the American people so that they will blindly rally behind him. In short, he needs to wag the dog. This, of course, has traditionally been done by embarking on some sort of short-term, low-risk military endeavor. The problem for Big Dick, however, is that a military mission is exactly what he's trying to divert attention away from. What then is a beleaguered president to do? Why, send Neil and Buzz to the moon, of course. Instead of wagging the dog, it's time to try something new. Wagging the moon doggy. So the namesake of this whole series that we're covering, I won't go point for point, but I do think it's worth reading that Article 3 to catch. You mentioned early on when we started talking about this, the brilliant nature of McGowan as he ties points together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's a really great excerpt about 2 paragraphs below that, where he just goes like timeline of events in the Vietnam War. You know, like he lines things like Operation Phoenix coming into the public knowledge with a moon landing. And then
every time there was some
beginning of Paris peace
need
talks,
for a distraction.
Pause on the
here you
Paris
go.
peace talks.
Yeah.
Oh, here's the, and then it's pretty interesting the way he frames it. I forget which one of the Apollo missions it is. I believe it's 13, where by this time, the way that McGowan talks about it, he says, the American public was kind of getting bored with all these successful moon landings. We'd done like 4 or 5 of them. Yawn.
Gotta take a car up there. Gotta go play some golf.
Yeah,
gotta
do different stunts. So finally, we decide. I say we. Finally, the big they decide. Well, we got to change the narrative up a bit. Let's have some kind of a problem up there. And so,
was that the
like
Apollo
the
13?
Apollo 13 mission where they get stuck out there in space, and it's kind of like we don't know if they're going to make it back. That, as far as McGowan is concerned, is just something to keep us interested in this space race and keep our eyes off of what's happening in Vietnam. And he's got some good writing on like, Tom Hanks and his buddies go up to space, and we just can't stop watching it.
It reminds me, I saw yesterday, there was an article that came out about there's a Japanese space program. It's a private company. God, I can't remember the name of it. You could look it up, but they sent a lunar probe up to the moon.
I came across an article about this.
And they lost contact with it. I haven't checked in to see what the status is, but pretty much they couldn't land. They're like, everybody's gathered around. They're so excited it's going to land, and then it just loses contact.
Yeah.
And it's just, God, it just made me think, like, with all the technology we have now, like, really, if you're going to compare the 1960s to what we have now, and even now, there's this, probably $1 billion startup trying to send just a probe to the moon.
Right. Yeah.
And they can't do it.
This is the first private company that Japan has used. To get to the
I think they used SpaceX to get something up there, and then but it does make you wonder, like, well, if it was like, why can't you send people?
Right.
Like, why aren't you sending people?
Reading about how intemperate and all the radiation, I get why you can't send people, but right, like,
but it makes you wonder, like,
how could we have sent people 50 years ago and now we can't send people?
Yeah, like all of a sudden you can't.
Well, they were America's greatest generation, and I don't say that lightly. That's the truth. But
boomers.
But they weren't superhuman, surely, right?
Well, I don't know. I just thought it was interesting reading that and thinking, like, my God, they can't even land a probe. Like, you just think that, and in one of the articles that McGowan's talking about the LRO and like these other low orbiting satellites that have taken pictures of the Apollo landing sites. Yeah. Allegedly.
Yeah, right.
And I actually went and looked one of them up because you look at some articles. I asked ChatGPT, I said something like, has anyone taken like credible photos of the Apollo landing sites? And it gave me a list of all these, like, and one of them was the LRO in 2011 had taken crystal clear images of the lunar landing sites. And it gave me a link too. And I'm like, all right, I'll go check that out. And he's right in his article that those are not, when we say crystal clear, I would not consider that crystal clear. Like, they're little white specks at a distance on the lunar. Like, I don't crystal clear see anything. I see a white speck, and they say you can even see the footprints of the astronauts. well, I see a couple of little lines, but I don't know what that is. I don't see, they just write it like, oh, like you see a footprint. No, I see like a line on a very far away image of the moon. I'm just saying, it's not, you're pulling it up.
It looks, like, if you told me that this was a picture of like a chemistry experiment, like we're just looking at,
atoms
at some, like more like biology experiment. You know, when they put something in a petri dish, and like little bacteria is climbing around each other, and they're in a little dish.
That's about what it looks like.
That's what this looks like.
So, can you look at that? Do you see a license plate number? Do you see something that's like
nothing?
Yeah, I see USA right there on the side. No, you're like, I don't know, 2 miles away in orbit on above, you know.
Yeah, really, the text on this is small enough that I'm hard making it. It's hard for me to make out the notation.
And
on
supposedly
what
the Chinese, they also had similar images, but I tried to look them up. I didn't find them. I don't see anything that's like. I've not seen a crystal clear image of a landing site.
This is crazy.
Where it's like, you know, like I said, USA on the bumper, and you go, okay, well
there we are.
There we were.
Yeah,
you see it?
Yeah, I did a little bit of searching for photos of it, and like McGowan said, there's talk of photos exist, but then when you go hunting for them, I didn't have much success finding anything.
Yeah.
And this,
but then you would think that would be like something that if you had it, it'd be front page of National Geographic.
I tried to spend some time looking at debunking sites. Granted, I did not spend as much time.
It's so boring, but
it is. Yeah, you are. It is a little vanilla. You're right.
It's just.
But I thought I've spent so much time like digesting.
Yeah, you
this.
should. You should definitely to be mentally sound.
Should balance this out because there was a point. I think it was yesterday, like in the middle of the day, I had gotten myself whipped up into such a fervor that I felt like physically kind of ill. And it was in the middle of this article, thinking about Nixon and, you know, the government coming up with this false narrative to keep us distracted and all the lies. And I just started getting all worked up, and I like really did not feel good all of a sudden. So I thought, okay, let's take a break. And then, I started looking into some debunking stuff, and a lot of the comments on more than one debunking articles and videos that I watched were, well, science has agreed that we did it. We landed on the moon, but there's no point for point cite on it, right? Like, and then like here we're hearing, well, there are photos of the landing, and I'm like, great. I'd love to see those.
Yeah.
Well, we have them. Great.
And then the only thing they show you is something. I see a white speck. I don't know what I'm looking at. You know. I
mean, I understand. This is kind of the broad general argument against conspiracy theories, that it's easier to kind of like poke holes in a narrative than it is to hard evidence prove something that happened.
It's really hard to go to Antarctica. I couldn't help myself.
But man, this seems like it should be pretty easy to prove, and it's a big deal.
Yeah, and it's not like the Antarctica thing in the like. You would think that if you had those things, that would be the first thing you see on your website.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Like if you like, I'm just saying, NASA, if you want any hints on how to like dispel all of these rumors of a hoax, all you have to do is put that stuff on your website so everybody can see it. Mm-hmm. Page 1 would be nice, you know? Like,
do you want to talk radiation, or when you talk
let's
about...
see where we are on time. Oh, we're about to lose our iPad. Plug it in. I thought I plugged it in. Maybe not. Let's save it for next time, because I think old iPad's about to give out on us.
So, well, I guess what I'd say is Article 4, he gets into photography. So as you're talking about, gosh, NASA, just put a couple pictures on the front page of your website, and that'll be that.
Just fly over and show us, like right here.
It sounds like next time we'll get into the issues with the photography, and I just would make the point of that's a real common conspiracy theory bullet point. Oh, the pictures.
Oh, yeah, we can say that real quick. Like because I sent you the picture of Buzz tweeted out a picture of supposedly what he took of Earth from the moon like last week.
I think I remember.
And I was like,
yeah.
hey, what's missing from this picture?
Oh yeah,
And,
yeah.
and you're like, the stars? I was
Yeah.
like, yeah. But that was a point that we made that he talks about that's really interesting is, well, I guess that's the next article when he talks about doing the experiment.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about photography. What I like about McGowan's writing is he doesn't hit on the same kind of talking points that
Keep
a lot
going,
of
I'm
other
listening.
conspiracy theories talk
Let's
about.
see if we can talk longer if I have
Um,
battery.
A lot of the other conspiracy theories, the general consensus is, or it's not just the general consensus, but kind of the like, when debunkers dismiss conspiracy theorists, they usually go, yeah, we know there are no stars in the picture. Like that's kind of the cliche, which is true, by the way. No stars.
And I sent you pictures of like just my own experiment. Okay, pictures of the space station. And you're like, well, I see stars.
Yeah.
I can see stars in the pictures from the space station. Why do I not see stars in any? I get it. There's like, they say it's because the exposure settings had to be at a certain
Right.
place because it's so bright, yada, yada, yada. But then McGowan makes the point, like, did nobody think to like point the camera up at the stars
Exactly, yeah.
and take a picture of the amazing stars with no atmosphere?
Yeah.
And nobody did.
I love this piece here. He says, collectively, the Dirty Dozen took thousands of photos throughout their alleged journeys, and yet, amazingly enough, not one of them thought it might be a good idea to snap even a single photograph of such a wondrous sight. Of course, endless photos of lunar modules and the monotonous lunar surface are exciting too, but just one or two photos of that dazzling lunar sky might have been nice as well. It's as if someone went to Niagara Falls and the only photos they brought back were of the car they drove sitting in a nondescript parking lot. And that to me is like, yeah, I understand that the photo settings that they had didn't capture the stars in some of the shots that we're used to seeing. Having said that, you're on the moon and some of the descriptions given, I understand, are like, boy, the stars sure are bright up there. And yeah, like when you're in a lowly populated area, the stars are very bright here with an atmosphere. You guys didn't get one picture of any stars while you're out there?
Maybe we'll leave it at this. Like, if you want like something to watch between now and the next episode, if you go and look up the press conference with these three astronauts right after they got back from the moon, and try to find a full version of it. Might have to go on Rumble, but if you find it, it's a bizarre press conference because these guys look like they're either drugged, but they are so uninterested in what they're talking about. It's just mind-boggling. And at one point, one of them says something like, because somebody asks, what do the stars look like? And he says, I don't remember seeing any stars.
I heard that excerpt.
And you just think, you were in space and you didn't see any stars? Like, isn't that the thing you'd look at?
Yeah.
And I don't know how to rationalize that, except it's just weird to watch that press conference and you just think maybe their brains were just zapped from being in space.
Sure.
Or maybe MK Ultra had just gotten them dosed up on some nice LSD. Who knows?
Yeah,
But
Jolly West
had visited them right before they come out.
I don't
but
remember any stars. Which, just now as you were talking about it, I thought, if I were the one being asked that question and somebody said, what do the stars look like? I'd go, rather than like, I don't remember any stars.
incredible.
Well,
Something.
I'd either say incredible or I'd say, you know what? Weird thing. I didn't even think to look at the stars. I was so focused on the moon. Like, they don't even seem like it's strange that they didn't notice the stars.
He says it like it's no big deal. And I think, yeah, weird. I don't know. Watch the press conference. And the next one we'll try to pack more in, because if we don't hurry this
gonna be a
along,
long slog.
it's a 14-part, series on the lunar landing. I don't know if people want to listen to us talk about the moon landing for 14 different episodes.
Good news is we didn't stay on subject real well this time.
So we will not talk about flat Earth, and we will focus on getting at least 2 or 3 more parts of this episode in. So thank you for listening to Conspiracy Dad Podcast. If you guys like the show, please like, follow, subscribe, give us a rating on iTunes. And if you want to leave a comment on YouTube or on the on iTunes for your favorite conspiracies, if you guys want to talk about something, if you just want to talk, I don't know. I mean, we're nice guys. We'll talk. Leave us a comment. You know, we're happy to bring up anything and everything.
We're not sponsored by BetterHelp yet, so we can just go ahead and
we just
fill that role for you.
Whatever you want to do. So anyway, thank you for listening to Conspiracy Dad. And until next time, we need a sign off. We need something like until next time. I don't know.
Well, maybe that's our homework assignment for this week. Or do you want to try and knock one out now?
I was hoping something would come to you. Until next time.
Until next time.
Keep your tinfoil hats on. Oh, I don't know. It's not a good one. Until next
Feels
time.
Feels like McGowan's probably got something good. Yeah.
That'll be the assignment between next.
Yeah. We're going to find a good McGowan quote.
We're going to sign off.
Yeah.
All right. See ya.